and pathos. I'd like to begin by asking Moreno to read the opening 2 paragraphs of The Fireflies of Autumn.
Okay.
Do you want to
Yes. Okay.
So first 2 paragraphs.
All right.
To give you a sense of the themes of the work and how it is pieced together.
This is called Ugo's Tale. Now, Ugo is my father's name. This is not necessarily my father, but I like using my father's and my mother's names because it makes me feel very attached and involved in what I'm writing about. Okay. Ugo's Tale. Dear reader, when you leave your homeland, you leave behind the people you know, the people your mother and father knew, your grandfathers and grandmothers, brothers and sisters, cousins, uncles and aunts, and neighbours, the people who know who you are immediately because you look like your father. You leave behind the courtyards, the roads, the lanes, the houses, the colours of the houses, the rows of houses, the names of small groups of houses, the shapes of the houses, the rooms in the houses, the stairs, the stones, the dreams that inhabit the stones, the fields, the walking paths, the irrigation ditches, the hills and the swamps, the grasses, the plants, the birds, the crops, the stables, the cows, the pigs, the rabbits, the chickens, the church, the bell tower, the cemetery, and the language you were born into that is deep in your heart, and all the things that happened that anyone can remember. Most importantly, you leave behind 1,000 memories. You embark on a ship in Genoa and disembark on the other side of the world, and your life is a clean slate. You cling to a wife or a husband and to the children if you have them already, or if you can, you bring some into the world to fill the emptiness.
Wow. Thank you. That is just such a strong sense of absence, really. Moreno, can you tell us about how and when you started writing about these experiences? What made you start?
All right. I was 12 years old when I wanted to be a writer when I was 12. I pestered my dad until he bought me a typewriter. He used to come down to Melbourne. This time he brought me with him. He would come down for the tobacco sales in Brooklyn, out in the western suburbs. He brought me into the city. We went to Pacific Typewriters. There was a shop in Elizabeth Street, and he bought me the typewriter. I took it home, and I used to type things at night. I'd write little stories. I was 12 years old. I was going to school. I'd write stories about my teachers, the girls, my friends. And it took me 51 years to write the first book because my other life took over. I ended up getting married. I had 2 children. We had a mortgage. And it was only when the kids were grown up and the mortgage was paid off that I thought, if I don't write the book now, I'm never going to do it. And I thought, well, what do I want to write about? And I remember thinking, well, I want to write about everything. And so I started. And I found myself writing about the very emotional things that had happened to me. And one of the most emotional things had been the trip back to Italy when I was 14 years old. My parents decided to return to Italy for good. We sold all our furniture, we sold the car, I gave my dog away to a friend, and we went to Italy. And I lived there for a year with my parents, who were not happy, so we came back again. But in the meantime, I had discovered this new life that I could have had if my parents hadn't brought me here. Because I was born in the village. We went to live in the village where they were born, where I was born. And so this is in the back of my head all the time. 3 years later, they sent me to Italy to start university. So I lived with my grandparents in the village where I was born. And I got to know what this village was like. And it always stayed with me. And so when I sat down, I was doing a creative writing master's And I thought, okay, what am I writing about? And I found that this was a very interesting thing to write about, because it was about, it was going to be a book, I realised, that about where I come from, who my people are, because this gives me some idea of who I am, and so I wrote about the place and the people that I became familiar with in the village. And I found that it was a very rich source of, for creative writing. It was still an agricultural society in the late 60s. There were cows pulling carts through the village. My grandfather didn't have a cow, he had a little tractor, one of those little ones, and he would use that to pull carts full of hay and so on. My aunt would help him in the fields, bringing in hay, and everybody was working. You walked outside in the morning and people are walking off to look after vineyards and olive groves, milling around in the village square and so on, and going off to work. So this desire to understand where I came from led to the first book, The Fireflies of Autumn, which refers to one of the chapters in the book. So that's where the idea came from.
And then were you writing sort of diary fragments? Was it planned out and structured, or did it just emerge?
It just emerged. Look,
yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing. I was 63 years old when the first book was published. I really didn't know what I was doing. I suppose they were stories. I tried to make them all fit. So every story is set in the same place, in the same village. The mood is the same through the whole thing. I never thought of them as stories. And people, when it was published, the critics were referring to them as tales, stories. Okay, I preferred the word tales because I made them a little bit magical, and a little bit like fairy tales. And I remember when I was kind of, at one stage when I was writing that book, and a lot of it was written during my course, right? I wrote it during my course and I finished it later. I had about 40,000 words and this is almost 80,000. So, I wrote another large chunk of it after the course was finished. But I read Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. I read Chekhov's short stories, just to see, not that I deliberately, copied anything. I just wanted to see what the kind of feeling that these authors put into the stories and what I got out of them. So that you could say they were those two books were the main inspirations. But you probably don't think of it. When you read the book, you don't think, oh, this is like Chekhov or this is like Hans Christian Andersen or something. You don't think that.
This is a lovely segue into the author's note in this one. Can you read that for us, please? So this talks about, we'll talk more depth about what decisions you were making as you were writing. You don't have to read.
I don't have to turn over?
You can.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Fair enough. I love reading my stuff to people, so listen. Okay? This is the author's note. While based on real events, this is a work of the imagination in which names have been changed, characters and scenes created, and facts distorted for dramatic purposes in order to tell, in a fantasy kind of way, the story of the Italian community and the story of my family who lived in Mitrefo and district in the 1960s. It is told as I remember it, and it is therefore imperfect, but nevertheless true. The imperfection is clear from the objections raised by some contemporaries of mine who have pointed out inaccuracies of fact in the text. I do not dispute their observations. I do wish my memory were more accurate or comprehensive or both, but then I would probably still have made stuff up. Buffalo River is a fictional place, not Buffalo River. Mitrefo is also a fictional place, and is not the same as Myrtleford. Mont Buffalo is not Mount Buffalo. You must understand that after 50 years, all places and people are fictional. For 3 of the characters in this Fabula Mirabilis, I have used my own name and the names of my mother, Morena, and my father, Ugo. I have done this for the emotional resonance and charge this brought to me and my writing process. I could not have done it if I had given my beautiful mother a name other than her beautiful name of Morena, and my handsome father a name other than his handsome name of Ugo. It was a way of feeling they were there with me as I wrote. I have inserted my own name as little as possible. Needless to say, I have not written a memoir, but simply a story based principally on memories of my childhood and youth in places that resembled the one where I grew up. My aim was to create a fantasy world based on one that has been largely unknown until now, and in which I hope the reader can become immersed, viewing with different eyes the lives of the immigrants they have until now superficially imagined. The lives and places I have created attempt to tell the other story, and to my mind they form a fabula mirabilis, or a wonderful story. And then there are the grotesques, stories of immigrants who did not find a better life.
So I think that gives a bigger insight, really a clearer insight than I could into how you have, I guess, categorised it. And it is such highly original work because it is combining all these different genres into one that makes it so interesting. I'm going to kind of slightly go sideways now. The passage of time, the passing of time in the immigrants is really interesting. It has an elasticity to it. Mm-hmm. It speeds up and it slows down. Sometimes you incorporate years into a single sentence or flash forwards in time so that we come to understand someone's whole life in one paragraph. And then there are other times when we're sitting with the boy, you refer to him as the boy, fishing by the river or feeding stone fruit to the pony, where it's a whole chapter. And, you know, time slows right down. And these are often interludes in the Australian landscape, and they're really slow and immersive. So I guess I was interested in how you decided, you know, where you were going to slow down and where you were going to speed up, and why. What were you thinking around time in that?
Oh boy, I think I just made it up as I went along. I had very kind of clear, fond memories of, for instance, of feeding the horses. I would sit up there was an orchard. There was a stone fruit orchard. I think we had apricots. It was mainly apricots. And I would climb the tree, and there were 3 or 4 horses in the orchard, and I would feed them the apricots. Take the stone out and put it in their mouths. And they, you know, and I just remember how much I loved that. I'd stay up and I'd be up in the tree for an hour, you know, feeding the horses. And on the riverbank also, I had such wonderful times. I would fall asleep on the riverbank when I was supposed to be catching fish. But I didn't really care if I caught a fish or not. I'd just be lying there in the sun, in the tall grass, hoping there'd be no snakes anywhere. My dog would be running around. So, you know, all that could become a longish piece, just the description of the riverbank. Because I could describe the river, I could describe the dog, what the dog was doing, the hill on the other side of the river, the grass. There's a lot to write about. And I just wrote what I remembered and that I was very fond of. So both those, the horses in the orchard and the riverbank, are examples of, I could really get stuck into it. And then, as an example, I was a fan of Ernest Hemingway. in my late teens and early 20s. And I loved the way he described certain things. Like, he writes stories about a character called Nick, who goes fishing. And all he writes about is the way that he prepares his rod, his line, the hook. He describes the river, there's a swamp at the end of it. And then he describes himself, Nick, cooking on a campfire and a little pan, cooking some food. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try something like that. I wanted to imitate that. So I wrote maybe half a page on, or a bit more, on the way that the boy prepared, slipped an earthworm onto a hook. In detail, because I'd done this a lot when I was a kid. I had put earthworms on hooks and put with a sinker on it and the line and the hook and the worm, and then I'd throw it in the water and I'd watch it sink to the bottom of the river. And it would float there, it might fall behind a rock, and then I'd see all these little redfin run in and have a look at it and then run away again, you know. So that was just an attempt at doing something, and I found this piece that I'd written. I'm going to put that in. It fits nicely, you know. And okay, so there is. I do write in detail. I had one of the critics who really loved my book. Look, all the critics loved my book. Just read getting critics, then buy the book. You know. He said something wonderful about the description of the. Look, I should blow my own trumpet, but I'm going to just very quickly. This was in Eureka Street. Is that the name of it? The journal. Okay. Yeah. He said that my descriptions of the Australian landscape, when the boy appears, reminded him of the shield of Achilles. Now, Achilles, the ancient Greek hero. Okay. Now. And I looked it up. I thought, what is it about Achilles' shield? Apparently, Achilles' shield contained all kinds of engravings and etchings and a lot of information about the land and the people and the wars and all this kind of thing, you know. So I was very chuffed at that, you know, to be compared to Achilles' shield. It was pretty good. But so the countryside. Also, the countryside always felt kind of slow and big to me. So, you know, the boy lived in a place that was very big. So you've got to describe it, what the horizon's like, the middle ground maybe, and then what it's like immediately under him as he's walking along, or the horse is walking along, or, you know, the horse knocks him. The horse bucked me off one day. I fell in the gravel and I just stood there. Luckily, he didn't step on me. So all these places in the landscape, you know, distance, middle ground, foreground, there's a lot you can say about that. And because, look, I think sometimes at that age, I was in my 10, 11, 12, 13, there wasn't much else to distract me. There's nothing to do except be out in the paddocks, you know, walk around on the riverbanks and that kind. So it stayed with me. Yeah, and I wrote about, you know, then I got into the tobacco, but that's a different story. And then, okay, and I've always thought you can summarise a person's life very quickly, you know, very, very briefly. If there's something that you remember about their life, you know, if you can somehow extract some little critical piece of information or detail and put it there, and then you let the reader work it out. All you do is you feed the reader a little bit of information, and the reader's imagination does the rest. You know, I remember having a discussion once in a class. I don't think it was in one of your classes. It was in one of Anthony's. About, I asked a question, and this is a group of about 15 people, and I asked them whether it was okay to say she was the most beautiful girl in the village. And I got howled down. No, you can't say that. Because it says nothing. You know, it was one adjective, beautiful, the village, oh, a big deal, you know. But I actually thought that could be an important sentence to say she was the most beautiful girl in the village. Because the reader reading that is going to think, wow, what does that mean? You know, what was she like? You know, and they might, if I don't give them any more information, they will start to create the beauty of this girl, especially if you then have her, you know, courted by some young man or something like that. Then they'll think, oh yes, she was the most beautiful girl in the village. You know, so it's a combination of that. You know, just the big things that you can write about in detail, and just little short, sharp statements about things.
Yeah, I can see technically partly you're trying to hold a lot of material, holding a lot of generations in that story, and you can't give everything the whole chapter because it just will go on forever. So there's that, but also it does mean we're quite centered, but there's nostalgia around the childhood. There's a sense of safety, happiness, peace, all those things, which I think is important for the story, isn't it? For that sense that child had those things, and you know, it's post-war, and it wasn't always easy in the village in Italy, so it's, you know, shedding light on that.
Look, the business about you know, the detail in the boy's life, especially in the immigrants, it was important to introduce something lighter than the grotesques, because the grotesques are very heavy and tragic and dark, and you know, the boy brings some lightness into the story, into the book. In fact, it was a discussion that I had with the publisher about when he first read the manuscript. He emailed me back and said, "Wow, you've written a wonderful book, but it's so sad," you know, he said. And we talked about it later on, and he was wondering whether it wasn't too heavy. Some of it wasn't too heavy. And I thought we should take the risk, because I really wanted to push the idea of people not getting a better life. And I thought my own family's life was a bit sad, but it wasn't tragic the way some of these other stories were. So I really wanted to push that quite heavily. I did cut, there's one chapter about, what is she called? An overweight, disheveled woman of Sicilian descent. That's the name of that chapter. And
that's
that was...
quote, isn't that almost, that's very close to a quote from a newspaper.
Yeah, it was, yes. It was out of the report. Yes. And it was 3 times as long as it is. The only, what I did was I cut out 2/3 of it, because I was going to make it so tedious and boring, based on a social workers and psychologists' report into this woman who was in an institution. I thought, if I make it long and dull and boring, I hope the reader thinks, oh wow, this is actually a person they're writing about, and what they're saying is very bureaucratic and heartless, you know. But I probably thought, well, I overdid it, so I cut it back. And also I had a discussion with the publisher, or my editor, about a chapter called Sleeping in the Car. I don't know if anyone's read it, that sleeping in the car, 2 boys sleep in the car on the Buffalo River Road going home. He thought it was boring, and I insisted, so we had a little to and fro via email. And the copy editor thought it was good, so she was on my side. And in the end, he ended up really liking it. You know, he told me after it was published that he thought it actually worked very well. So I'm glad that I stood up for that one. But we made very little changes, very few changes to this book. We made more to this one because I really didn't know what I was doing. Whereas this one here, you know, it was, we hardly touched it, actually.
Do you think they gave you more of a free rein because they were, by then they used your style and?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think, look, they like me. I've written 2 books in my 60s. I've written 2 books, and they've published both of them. Some people take years to get a book published. They have to send it to 50 different publishers, you know. Well, I consider myself very fortunate. I found an editor at Black Ink, Chris Fike, who likes what I write, and yeah, he trusts me now. He's waiting for the third one, for the third book, and I'm terrified of that as well. I was terrified the first time. I was terrified the second time. Equally terrified. There's no difference really. And I'm going to be terrified the third time as well. I'm talking too much, Kristen.
No, you can't.
No? Okay, all right. This book, in order to, when I had finished it, I waited, I don't know how many weeks, maybe a month, before clicking send inside my email program, because I was terrified that he would think it wasn't any good. Because he'd liked, I sent 40,000 words, but now it was 80,000. And I was thinking, he's not going to like it, I'm going to be humiliated. Everybody I know knows that I'm supposed to be sending this to the publisher any day now. And they'll wonder, what happened to it? Have you sent it? What did they say? Are they publishing it? You know, I thought I would be rejected, humiliated, totally exposed as an imposter, right? And I realised if I want to do this, if I want to have a go, at least a chance of publishing a story about my ancestral village, I'm going to have to face that as a possible consequence of sending it. So I had actually been through it in my head. I'd already experienced the humiliation of rejection, and I thought, well, what can they do to me now? I know what it feels like. I'm going to send it, you know, and this is what I want to do, so tough, you know. And I sent it, and it was fine. You know, they published it. This one was shortlisted for the Victorian Premier's Award in 2018. And it was shortlisted for the Readings Prize, the bookshop chain. So straight away I get 2 shortlistings, you know, which is pretty good. I thought it was good. But that was what I went through psychologically before I sent the manuscript to the publisher. And I went through the same thing with this, with the immigrants. With the immigrants, it was through COVID, and that was a mess. I had stuff all over the place. I rented an Airbnb in Yakandanda, which is near where all this happens. And I went up there for 10 days. I had 2 cardboard boxes full of notes and notebooks. I had a large chunk of it on my laptop. I used to ring my wife every evening, we'd have a chat. I was there on my own. I'd go for a walk during the day, cook some food in the little flat. So I was completely alone, and I started putting it together. Now, I thought I was doing it chronologically. I thought this time, I'll start, and it starts in the 1950s, you know, and I'll take it through to the end, where Ugo and Moreno die, basically. And I managed to, in those 10 days, I put together this one file. I put everything that I had in the 2 cardboard boxes together in one file, and tidied it up a bit, went home and worked on it maybe for another week, and then I waited until I had the courage to email it to the publisher. And like I said, he writes back and says, "Oh wow, you know, you've written a wonderful book." I thought, yes, you know, it was great. Yeah.
So great, thank you. I still have quite a lot of questions, but I'm actually wondering whether other people might have questions at this
Sorry for talking so much.
No, that's fine.
I have one about context. Yes, your writing is, in a specific sense, quite wonderful and captivating, but there's something universal in the immigrants, and there's something perfect in your timing of lobbing a book like this into our current context. Is that something you've reflected on?
No, but I'm aware of that. The fact that migrants are in the news again. And they're going to be in the news for the next couple of years until the next election. They're going to be in the news. I've had a chip on my shoulder ever since I was a teenager, basically, about several things to do with migrants, and in particular Italian migrants. And I just wanted to get it off my chest. I had to write about it, because I knew I would, and you can see it now, I think, on Australia Day, we have citizenship ceremonies. And I remember as a kid watching the news and seeing happy little migrants holding their citizenship certificates, maybe with a sprig of wattle or something, and being asked inane questions. Are you happy you're here? What's it feel like to be an Australian citizen now? And I used to think, what do you think they're going to say? No, we don't like it. Yeah. Of course we do it. We love it here. Everything's fine, you know. And I'd think, okay, well, they really can't tell you. And I knew people in my teens who'd had terrible lives here in the Italian community. Friends of my family. We had no relatives, it was just friends. And you'd hear about people's misfortunes and so on. And then, you know, because I was a reader as an adolescent, I used to read a lot. I read about people like my parents being referred to as Mediterranean scum in Australia, or the Chinese of Europe, because to be Chinese was bad. And these are it's just the European version of the Chinese, you know. And I think, no, my parents aren't like that. They're not Mediterranean scum. Why are they saying these things about them, you know? I also had a thing about what I used to think of the food fetish. That I think it's the whole English-speaking world has a food fetish about Italian food.
Oh, yeah.
All Italians eat spaghetti. Okay. When there's a migrant reception centre in northeast Victoria called Bonagilla. You might have heard of it. They had a couple of little kind of riots because people didn't like the food. The Herald Sun, or its equivalent, on the front page they had spaghetti riots. You know, I'm thinking, okay, it must be Italians, you know. So that's just always really annoyed me, those kinds of things. And unfortunately, even Franco Cozzo, you remember him? He used to annoy me as well. Because I think my parents aren't like this, they don't talk like him. And maybe but he used to exaggerate it, you know. And people would make fun of the way Italians pronounced English words. And I think to myself, that's just the way my parents speak. Yeah, that's why I thought, I'm going to try to reclaim the night here. Buffalo River will become Buffalo River. That's how they pronounced it, and that's what it is. Myrtleford becomes Mitreford. That's how they said it, and it's perfectly fine. You know. And then there's Mont Buffalo, and I thought I'll stop at that. I'm not going to go further. You know, just make a point, and it's that. So yeah, migrants and attitudes to migrants are going to be in the news, and you know, maybe somebody will read this book and think, oh, okay, they're not too bad, you know, and we shouldn't pick on them.
But places you in a very interesting position personally now, I think.
Look, I mean, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
You know, I have that chip on my shoulder. It's still there. The chip is still there. I've got some things off my chest, but you know, there's a bunch of people called Sushi Mango.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of them?
Yeah.
Very funny.
Well, I think, okay. It's not terrible racism, but they're making fun of my mum, my mother-in-law, people like that. The way they decorated their houses, you know, the food they made, the accents they had, which I don't like it, you know, but it goes on. It's probably what you might call soft racism. You know, it's soft racism.
It's just racism.
Sorry?
It's just racism.
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Do you think it's improved? Because I'm from England,
Yep.
and I revere Italian food.
Yes.
friends.
Sure.
I have an Italian friend
Yep.
who's a chef and has
Yep.
opened lots of restaurants.
Yep.
And I just don't, I'm not saying it didn't happen,
No.
but I just don't relate to those feelings. Has it improved?
Has what improved? Sorry.
The attitude about Italian immigrants.
Look, I think it still exists a bit. It really does. It's there. And if it's not the Italians now, it'll be someone else. It'll be the Sudanese or anyone from the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know, it just keeps coming around. Every few years, it seems to me, this thing comes back. You know, and hopefully, you know, and maybe, I don't know, maybe younger people don't remember the last time we had these kinds of discussions, but I certainly do, but I'm older, you know. So has it improved? I don't think so. What's changed is the group has changed, the group that we pick on.
Yeah. Sure.
Italians were
Yeah.
considered black once. Hard to believe that they were. Then they became white, really. And the Greeks were considered black, you know. And if you read about that issue, you learn that to be black is not a question of skin colour. It's a question of acceptance and attitude in the host society. People think of you as black, and then you are, you know, until you pass through and the next lot are considered black. You know, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for writing about the chip on your shoulder
Yeah.
from another immigrant.
Yes.
And thinking of one of my other favourite books, Romulus, My Father.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you about third culture kids, which is someone who is in a different culture to what their parents' passport culture is. And
Yep.
so essentially they're not that, and
Yep.
they're not the culture that they're in.
Yep.
They're a third culture.
Yes.
So how did that factor in your writing and, you know, the thoughts and feelings that you had as you're writing about being an immigrant?
Yeah. Look, I think when I was, I lived in Italy in my late teens, because my parents sent me back. They came back I went to uni and so on. So I experienced being Italian, and the more I was there, the less Australian I was. But when we came back, I'm living in Australia again. Although I'd gone from the farm at Buffalo River in northeast Victoria to a village in Tuscany in Italy, university in Pisa, come back, and I'm living in Melbourne now, and I know nothing about Australia. I haven't really hung around Australians much. You know, I was on the farm, we had Italian labourers, we had Croatian and Serbian labourers, we even had Chilean labourers at one stage. So I come to Melbourne and I'm trying to fit in again. And it was hard for me. I felt like a migrant again when I came to live in Melbourne. And, you know, I realised I wasn't like my parents, but I wasn't like these other people as well, that I was trying to make friends with. And so it was, you know, it was a little bit mixed up. I don't know that I ever resolved this issue, but I think what happened was I met my wife in the Italian department library at Melbourne University. And then I met her parents, and they absolutely loved me because we could all speak Italian, and her mother started inviting me over for Sunday lunch. And so within 3 years we were married, and it like fixed my life up completely, because my parents were up in the country and they were having a difficult time in their relationship. I felt like I had found my place in her family. I found a family, a new family, where I felt at home, and you know, I felt looked after and cared for, and you know, my mother-in-law was wonderful. I mean, you know, I felt like I'd married the family instead of just Anna. You know, I felt like I'd married the family, and it was great. And it fixed a whole lot of my problems there and then. And then I could just worry about the other problems, which were, you know, am I Australian or Italian? And I started remembering the life my parents had had and, you know, all that kind of thing. But in the immediate, present, meeting her and her family solved a whole lot of problems for me. I think I've got a line in the book where I mention her by name and how she fixed everything. I just say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So could you speak English when you arrived back?
Here.
Yes.
Yes, look, I was 2.5 when I came here. I went to school here. I went back when I was 14. I was there for 1 year in Italy, going to school. Year 9 I did in Italy. Came back here, so my main language was always English. We spoke Italian at home. I spoke Italian in the village in Italy for 1 year. When I went back the second time, I was there for almost 3 years. I went to university. I'm speaking Italian in the village with my family, great-grandparents, and that. So I became very bilingual. But, you know, by now the Italian language has deteriorated quite a bit, which is what happens. It's kind of normal. I can have a wonderful conversation in Italian about ordinary everyday things, but the most difficult thing is always writing in another language. That's why I write in English, because English is my mother tongue. You know, there's a whole chapter about the Italian language, though. I urge you to read it. Yes.
I want to ask you, do you ever feel, I'm talking as a migrant too, once we left our country and come here, and first time I went to visit my country, I felt I don't belong anymore. I don't belong there and I don't belong here.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, I felt like that. And not initially, because the first time. We were there for a year, everything was fine. I was going to be Italian, I'm sure in the back of my mind, that's what I was. I was going to school, I had friends, we all spoke Italian all the time, that was fine. And the second time as well. We went back to stay, and you know, I was perfectly at home on those 2 occasions. In fact, the first time we came back, I missed the village because I didn't want to be in the country anymore by myself. You know, even if I had a horse or a dog or a fishing rod, I wanted to be in the village, in my grandparents' house, with all my friends outside the front door. You know, to go out with, hop on a scooter and go into the town and watch girls in the piazza, you know, that kind of thing. Which you don't do in the country. It's a different kind of life, you know. And I completely lost interest in fishing when I came back. That was like the biggest kind of sign that I wasn't at home anymore. And that's what in the end brought me and made me stay in Melbourne, because I felt in the city there are a whole lot of people that I can get to know, there are a whole lot of activities I can get involved in, I can go to art galleries and, you know, easier to go to the pictures or to the football or whatever. And so, you know, feeling at home, look, and in the end, I was never in a position where I could have gone back. I mean, I met my wife, we got married, we had children, we had a mortgage, that's it. I mean, there goes your life, basically. It's been a lovely life, mind you. I've been very happy, I really am. I'm very happy about all that. But yeah, for my parents it was more of an issue, I think. And I felt it a little bit, this thing about not belonging. But I knew that I couldn't kind of, or just on my own, go back, because my parents were here in the end. They were here. And so was my brother. You know, they tried to leave me in Italy the second time. they said, you stay here, go to university, we'll leave you the house, the car, there's money in the bank, your grandfather will give it to you from time to time. And I went to the airport to say goodbye to my mum and my brother. My dad had already come back. And, you know, on the bus going to Fiumicino, Rome Airport, I'm thinking, I'm not going to stay here. You know, we had always been together, the four of us. We had no other family here in Australia. It's always the four of us together. I thought, I'm not going to leave them. I'm not going back to the village and let them, you know, my brother will grow up. I won't see him and he'll be different when I see him again. So I waited a few months and then I sent my dad a telegram and said, I want to come back too. So I was supposed to stay there and be the magnet that brought them back to Italy. You know, that's how they thought it would work.
Your parents were bringing you here initially.
Did I resent
Did you
them?
resent that?
No, look, I didn't resent them. I just wondered why they did it. My dad, he died when he was 89.
Okay.
The last 2 or 3 years of his life, he used to ask me whether he had done the right thing, you know. And I would think to myself, what am I going to say to an 89-year-old man? I say, of course you did. You know, look at us, me and my brother. We've got families, we've got houses, we've got a house each, we've got cars, we've got good work, you know, that kind of thing. I'm not going to tell him that he made a mistake. My mother was just homesick most of her life until she gave up. She gave up and she found herself a third husband because she left my dad. Then she got together with a terrible man. He was an alcoholic and he abused her psychologically. I don't think he ever hit her, but it was a terrible life she had. And when she finally managed to leave him, the third time she was lucky, she got herself a nice, accommodating, kind, gentle man.
Italian?
Yes, yes. The second one was German.
Moreno.
The fact that he was an alcoholic.
Yeah. Signore Silvana here.
Yes.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for sharing all of this with us. I relate to many of the experiences you're sharing with us.
Yes.
And I wanted to make a comment, draw our attention to Hugh Mackay, the author and researcher, who talks in one of his many books about belonging, about connecting, and about identity. And it seems to me, and I have not read your book as yet, but I will be, these are the themes that you are also exploring in your book, it seems.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah, absolutely. The idea of belonging, when I apply it to myself now, my life has, in a way, it has shrunk. It's come down to, I now belong to, first of all, the memories I have of my mother and father and the life that they led, and of my childhood. So I belong to that. And that belongs to me. But also, I belong to my family, my wife and children and their families, to my house, my garden. This is where I belong. And I have a few friends who are all, for some reason, they're either Greek or Lebanese. You know, they're my friends. I even have a couple of Australian friends. And I still don't know, it's funny, but this is how my parents brought me up. They used the word Australian, you know, which is not a good thing to do, but that was what I heard. You know, my mum would talk about Australian girls and how they weren't very good, and how they didn't raise children properly. Australian children were allowed to run around in the frosty mornings barefoot. An Italian would never let a child run around barefoot. You know, never.
They'll get sick.
Anyway, and I just convey this in the book because that's what it was, you know. And I'm not saying she was right or she's probably wrong. She has a little bit of bias herself, you know. The kind of picking on that she got, you know, she dished it back to people. But certainly belonging, I have a small life now and I'm perfectly happy with it. And that's where I belong. I don't try to belong to anything different. I suppose you could say, I follow Australian politics a lot. I'm very interested in politics. I don't follow Italian politics very much anymore. I used to when I was younger, but you know, it's past me now. And I don't have this conflict anymore. I basically know where I belong and I stay there and I'm happy to be there. You know.
Beautiful.
That's a beautiful message.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
Are you going to be looking at creating the book so in different languages?
No, because nobody wants it. The
yeah,
publisher
I thought
has
Italian
tried.
would have been fantastic. Just
The publisher has tried to get the Italian publishers interested in both these books, and both times they've said no. The first one, Italians would not be interested in reading about village life in Italy, written by an Italian Australian. Okay, they've been there, done that. They're not interested. And I remember getting some feedback from my publisher, who contacted some publishers in America, and they thought, nah, Italians in Australia, American readers aren't going to be interested in that. You know, so anyway, that's the story. So, which is fine, because I never expected them to be published anyway in any language. So, yeah, I'm perfectly content.
just the wonderful stories you spoke about. Sorry for interrupting. The wonderful stories you spoke about brings all that memories back to me, because I'm the daughter of Italian migrants, and it makes me quite emotional.
Yes.
And I'm sure that there would be others that would love to read it in Italian, just to let them know the sacrifices a lot of Italians did, you know, trying to make a living in the rural side of the country, where there was not a lot available. It's just magnificent. I just love it. I thought the Veneto Club would have been the perfect one.
Don't give up yet, because
Yes.
as it wins more and more prizes, they will start to look, and it might sometimes take a few years, but it might get picked up.
Fantastic.
Excuse-
I'm trying to think about the next book next. This one was published on the 1st of July 2025. So it's been out for more than a year already. You know, and it's gathered steam because of the prizes that it's won and the shortlisting. You know.
Are you hoping to win the Prime Minister's award?
That I don't know. You know.
Just
This-
one
yeah,
question.
sure.
The coroner's report,
Yes.
the little boy that died with the snake bite,
Yeah.
did you access that report?
Yes.
Oh, that was very good, how you integrated that.
Look,
And I
yeah.
enjoyed that story. It was very sad, wasn't it?
the grotesques. We haven't talked about the grotesques much. These are the 4 of them. I think it was 4. Come from coroner's reports in the State Archives in North Melbourne. I went looking for events that happened in that part of the world, northeast Victoria. The first one I found, I changed everything, the names of people, the time, the period, all that. The incident remained what it was. And this was, to push, is that the right word? To push the envelope as far as I could, to almost scare people and make them feel some sense of outrage that ordinary human beings actually have terrible things happen to them. And you know, they don't all come here and they're not all happy, you know, when they come here. Awful things can happen to them. And here's an example, and here's another one, you know, that kind of thing.
There's something about this book that puts a mirror to white Australia, even though that's not what you've actually primarily sought to write about, but actually I felt strongly reading it. That's what was happening for me.
Yeah, I wanted to, I don't know if this comes across, Paul, I don't know how well I did it, but I wanted the people who are already here, like the Scottish, the Welsh, the Irish and the English. I wanted them to be the outsiders. I didn't want the Italians to be the outsiders. I thought, I'm going to write it from the point of view inside the Italian community, looking out. What do you see when you look out?
And that's the mirror, I think. Then if you look at the mirrored view, that's the white Anglo.
Yeah. Yeah. So I use the word colony here and there as well, you know, colonial. That's thanks to my uncle Paolo. Can I read that bit?
Sure.
Okay, this is my uncle. I dedicated it to him, to my uncle Paolo. Okay.
Australia?
No, my uncle, he died a couple of years ago.
In Italy.
In Italy, yes. He was my mother's brother. He's almost like, he was the last uncle to die. Okay, and the village is called Sanginese, okay? In Sanginese, his uncle Paolo enthusiastically argued that Australia was an English colony, that it was settled by the English, and that in the late 20th century, it was still an English colony, in particular after the Queen of England sacked the government. The boy tried to explain the workings of the Australian government, but Paolo insisted. Australia had been settled by the English and was still occupied by them. By English, he meant British, but in Sanginese, they said English. I used to have these arguments with my uncle. He'd say, no, the Queen of England rules Australia. And I'd say, no, I tried the way it works, you know, the Governor General and all this. And he'd say, that's rubbish, you've been brainwashed. So I just thought I'd stick that in.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. One more round of
Thank you,
applause. Charlotte Moreno is very happy to sign books, so please buy them and you will sign them.
I will, free of charge. And thank you, wonderful audience, really, fantastic questions. I felt a great engagement and warmth in the place.
You can,
Can I ask you
he
something?
can launch
Buy a
his
book
next
now?
book
Is it still
here.
Still open?
Till still open,
Okay,
you can buy books.
Okay.
Okay.
I have so much I wanted to say. I know some of the people in the room were on the same boat as your parents were. Is that right, Eric?
Oh, the parents were.
Yeah, as your parents were.
The Fair Star?
Or Fair Sea.
Yeah, my dad came on the Fair Sea in 1957.
Oh,
Yeah, same
It went back and forth because actually my dad was on that.
You're kidding.
But my dad was in 49.
Oh my God.
So different years. Yeah.
Through Picker.
Your parents got out of there before my parents got out of there. We hate
From
money
Italy.
more than you. No, Hungary.
So
we
we
were Hungary.
Oh,
From
when
Hungary.
was that?
Okay.
Same.
Because Hungary,
Same boat.
my parents, my dad came from Hungary and
I guess you got
Wow.
Wow.
Small world.